Welcome to the Book Flood Podcast. I am your host, Tom Nixon. My guest this week is Becky Calzada. Becky is the 2024-2025 AASL President, a District Library Coordinator in Leander, Texas, and a co-founding member of Texas Freedom Fighters. She was selected for the 4th ALA Policy Corp Cohort, works as a member of the ALA Policy Corp Proactive Advocacy on Book Banning Cadre, and is a past member of the ALA Intellectual Freedom Committee. She is actively involved in the Texas Library Association and serves on the Legislative Committee and was a past chair for the Texas Association of School Librarians Division in 2016-2017. Becky is the recipient of several Intellectual Freedom Awards and was honored by People magazine in their 2023 Women Changing the World portfolio. Becky is the co-author of Prepared Libraries, Empowered Teams, a workbook for navigating intellectual freedom challenges together, which was published by ALA Editions in June 2024. Welcome, Becky.
Hi, Tom. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Oh, absolutely. I am so very excited that you were here with us. Why don't we start with you describing your career path? How did you get here?
So, Becky Calzada got here by way of education as a teacher. In Texas, you have to have a teacher certification before you become a school librarian. So, I was a first grade teacher for about 12 years. Before I even considered becoming a librarian. And it was a librarian, a school librarian, who actually nudged me into considering becoming a school librarian. And so I actually attended a couple of author sessions with her and was just hooked with the whole author piece. And when I moved to the Austin area, I actually decided to go ahead and launch into my school library certification by going to the University of Texas, Austin, to get my master's in library and information science. And so I studied with some really great educators there, and of course became a school librarian. I was actually still in school in my last semester when I got my first job in an elementary school, actually the elementary school that I was teaching in at the time. And so I worked there for a bit, and then opened a new school. We are in a fast growth district, so I had the opportunity to open a new school library called Westside Elementary. And then I opened another school library at elementary. I like to say like it was an opportunity of continuous improvement because I opened it the next year, so I just wanted to try it again. So, and then I was at River Ridge there for about 3 years. I've always had an interest in leadership. I think it's just something that's par for the course as far as school librarianship goes. But I had an incredible district library coordinator who nurtured me. And when she found out she was going to have to move, she reached out and said, "You should apply for this position as a library coordinator." And I wasn't too sure because I'd only been an elementary librarian. But she said, it doesn't matter what age group you are in. She said, we all have the same problems, whether you're elementary, middle, or high. So I applied and got the job, and I have been a district library coordinator now for about 12 years. Maybe even longer. I don't know. It's so hard for me to track. I've been in my school district for this is my 28th year, and my 38th as just an educator in public schools. So, yeah, it's been a while, but I think the career path has, I say I chose it, but I think it chose me when I was a young girl, because I used to go to the public library and I was very involved in my public library. School library was a place for me to go to because I was very, very shy. So I was always in the library hiding, just getting lost in books. But somehow I just managed to make my way back. And so here I am now, doing, of course, my role as a coordinator, but also working with other school librarians here in my state and across the country.
Can you talk a little bit about the importance of the AASL standards in the daily life of librarians?
Sure. So I I love our AASL standards because they are a great framework to guide school librarians in terms of how they, want to work with their learners. I think when I see them, we've had such amazing committees that have either done crosswalks, say where they do a crosswalk of the standards with the standards for coding, or maybe the Future Ready Librarians framework. And so there's been a lot of crosswalks done, the national sign standards. And so one of the things that I love is that our standards have really come to life in not through the curriculums or the different kinds of other frameworks that we've connected them to, but one of the things that I appreciate most is, the verbs themselves to collaborate and to curate. And, and those are just a few. So in terms of the daily life and the daily work, they're definitely a springboard for school librarians in the work that they do, whether it's around the different core disciplines, or maybe it's around programming even, but they not only extend to students, but they extend to the school library program as a whole in terms of how it impacts the whole school, and even beyond in the community too. So they're definitely something that can be used daily, and there's so many resources online on our website, at the AASL website, for members, and even for non-members. If you're a member, you get a little bit more, but there is a lot of benefit even for those that maybe are curious and want to learn more. So,
yeah, I always particularly like the different crosswalks out there, just because my experience, both as a librarian and then as a library services manager, convincing people that the library standards go beyond just library folks sometimes is a challenge.
yes.
But when you can say, oh, by the way, the standards of your organization also fit quite nicely in here.
Yes, they do. And I think about that, whether it's the science curriculum, social studies, standards. And so again, it's definitely an entry because they're used throughout. And of course, even publishers look to those standards in other core curriculum areas. And so I love that we've been able to bring those to our users.
So you have been on ALA Policy Corp and ALA Intellectual Freedom Committee. Tell us a little bit about the work of those committees.
So the ALA Intellectual Freedom Committee was an appointment. I believe it was Emily Drabinsky who reached out and said, would you consider being a member? And I had never considered it, but was doing the work. So I ended up deciding, well, I'm sort of doing a lot of this intellectual freedom work. So doing this more formally in a committee setting would be beneficial, and I don't know, might even bring me some insights. And sure, it sure did. So one of the things that first of all that it did was it brought me to a network of people of like-minded individuals that were just as interested in supporting intellectual freedom and access for patrons, for users, for students, and all. But then the other piece of it too was, as a committee, we did a lot of work around review of the actual intellectual freedom manual. And so I was a part of that group there. It's going through a review right now. We're actually trying to finalize some things, but we've reviewed different statements and the manual itself. And so I was able to help work in that and participate in some of that, give feedback and that sort of things, get feedback from other people. And then I think the other big piece is that it also sort of kept me in the loop of what was happening. And so there's a core group of people that are on this committee, but we have standard reports, like from the Office of Intellectual Freedom of what's coming on, what's coming ahead, or maybe what's happening in certain parts of the country or states and that sort of thing too. So you have a little bit of insight, which I think is always great, and a benefit in terms of when you're a member of a committee like this. Now, Policy Corp is a little different. It's not so much a committee as much as it was, there was an application process to that. And so I happened to attend the AASL conference in Salt Lake City and heard Amanda, our incoming AASL president, and Stephen I can't think of his last name, but anyway, former AASL president speaking about the Policy Corps and the advocacy work that they did at the state and national level around libraries. And I've always had an interest in advocacy work. I mean, again, it's part of the work that you do as librarians, but as the chair for the Texas Association of School Librarians, I've either testified at committee hearings or testified on a bill and that sort of thing too. So I'd done that before and felt like this opportunity to apply might help to expand my understanding around advocacy work. And, I thought if at a minimum, I would learn about tips and just ideas on advocacy work at the national level to bring back to the state. So in some ways it was a bit selfish, but at that time, we were also just starting to see a lot of intellectual freedom attacks in Texas. And intellectual freedom was a core area of advocacy work at that time when I applied years back. But I mean, basically, you like submit a written application. If you were accepted, they kind of did like a first run, and so they gleaned a couple of first people that they thought, oh, we want to go further with this group. So in the second round, you had to submit. You had an advocacy issue, and you had to basically share why or what would you say to this legislature about XYZ, and film yourself and submit it. And so I guess I did something right because I got accepted. And so what's happened because of that is I've been with this group of leaders, and it's a makeup of all different kind of school library types. So school, public, academic, and special librarians that come together and get training around advocacy work. We meet virtually, sometimes we meet in person, but we get a lot of learning around advocacy work, and then we're called upon also to go to the Capitol to speak to legislators and that sort of thing. So I think the biggest benefit has been meeting, just with intellectual freedom, meeting like-minded colleagues that have the same interests, but also learning from one another, because there's just something to be said about listening to other people and what they do, what they've learned, and sharing those tips.
So in these times that we're having currently, you may have noticed there's some oddities happening in Washington, D.C. these days. In these times, what's it like to be the visible face of all school librarians everywhere, at least in the U.S.?
So it's a bit overwhelming because when I think about, and I've been doing a lot of reflecting about this because I'm coming, not quite at the end, but I'm nearing the end of my term. People, if you really, really know me, you know that I was a very shy person growing up. I'm an introvert. I don't mind being with people, but I just kind of have to go shelter in a little bit afterwards because it's just a lot of stimulus. And of course, then I'm by myself here at home, and when you go home, you go to work, you come home, you have this time to just kind of decompress. You get used to that, so it's just overwhelming at a conference, right? But I do love to meet people. I love to hear about the challenges that they have. I think as far as the visibility piece, I think the benefit has been one that people at least know that there's somebody I hope that they can trust, but that also too, that there's a thought partner that hopefully is, and my goal is always to just listen and maybe ask questions and brainstorm and work with a colleague to see well, what have you tried this and have you tried that, or at a minimum connect them to somebody that maybe can. One of the things that I really appreciate about the work that I've done with my colleague Carolyn Foote on Texas Freedom Fighters is that we've been school librarians for quite a while, and we're pretty connected. We used to, connect online on Twitter when it was that robust professional learning network that it was, and we participated in Twitter chats and went to conferences and stuff, and so we've had the benefit of knowing a lot of people, and so. I think that's been a help in that, it allows us to, when somebody reaches out and says, I'm looking for somebody that can do XYZ, or do you know somebody that's had this experience, that people know and trust us, and so we're able to connect them. And I'm very grateful for the trust that people have in me, and also just grateful for the opportunity to get to meet other people and learn from them, because in terms of being able to get out, I think people assume that, oh, well, you already know this. You're not going to learn much here. Well, I'm not one to. I first of all would never admit that I know everything, because I don't. I'm a believer that the minute you say you know everything, you've stopped learning. And so I just go listen, and I observe, and if I can, we'll share, because I think that's what everybody honestly will try to do. But I think also too, I just am looking for one little new takeaway, and I feel like that's a benefit to me too. And so at a minimum, I'm just meeting more people, but more often than not, I am learning alongside with these people that think that I know everything, but no, I'm still learning along with you.
You mentioned the Texas Freedom Fighters. Talk a little bit about that.
So the Texas Freedom Fighters was launched 4 years ago. So our school district, in my school district, particularly in Leander, we were going through some book challenges around curriculum. There were some parents that were not very pleased with some of the books that were part of the choice options for different book clubs. And at the time, I was concerned about it impacting the school library. And I was told by our administration that, no, this is not about school libraries. This is just about the curriculum books. You are fine. We're not concerned about the school library books. Okay, but then a year later, it started becoming about the school library books. And not only that, we were also fielding a lot of questions. This is when people were going to school board meetings and reading passages, piece together passages from books. You often saw videos of people bringing props even to board meetings, and to show along with the words that they were sharing. And they were calling librarians all kinds of names, and just basically disparaging the professionals that are within our walls. And it was very, very frustrating, because first of all, I just have always known, like, I'm not going to engage with somebody on social media, because it's not productive. But then second of all, just knowing what can we do to address this. And so one Saturday morning, I was on Twitter and noticed that someone had posted about a favorite book that they really loved, and how it changed their life as a reader. And I shared it with Carolyn Foote, my colleague, and said, look at this tweet. This is really cool. I love that this person is sharing what they love about a book. I said, wouldn't it be amazing if we did like a hashtag takeover of this legislative hashtag for Texas, and shared about the books we love? And she immediately texted me back and said, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. We should, write this up, and we'll share it with our librarian friends, and we'll share it with our author friends, and we'll keep it secret, because all of a sudden what we'll do is just start posting on this day. And so we started planning what day to do it. It was after the election, and the national election. And so we basically just asked people to share a book that they loved, and how it impacted them. And that day we had over 18,000. We had so many tweets. It was a 6 trending topic on Twitter. I remember distinctly, like, being at home and scheduling my tweets, because I wasn't going to do it during work time, because I like to keep my work and my personal stuff separate. So I scheduled something at 5:30 and at 6 and at 6:30, and then I stopped at 8. But people started just sharing like different books, and so I shared New Kid by Jerry Craft, because I loved what it taught me about what a student could feel like, that was experiencing microaggressions in a private school. But people slowly just started sharing their favorite books. And Carolyn was in California at the time, and was actually like on a vacation, and actually spending her vacation resharing some of the tweets, because we started to notice the engagements were people that had knew about it, but then also people that said, I want to join this too. And I think by the time the day was over, we just realized that so many people were looking for hope, because at that same time we were also navigating the 850 title book list from Representative Matt Krause. He was sharing that list with all the schools and districts in Texas and asking them to remove titles and databases and that sort of thing too. We were also hearing from our governor, and he was threatening, he was asking people to send the titles of the pornographic books so that he could fire the librarians. And so it was just so volatile. But to see that come to light in a positive way, just first of all showed that people needed that. But then also it just demonstrated the need that people wanted to be connected because they wanted to do something around intellectual freedom. But at the time, our organizations like Texas Library Association or the American Library Association weren't really doing anything, because I think they all believed, again, early stages, that it was going to go away. Because it was just that fall. But it wasn't until the following spring that they finally started launching, like United Against Book Bans or Texans for the Right to Read. But in the meantime, we built a website. We decided to create documents around, how to write a letter to the editor, how to write to your school board, how to write to your school, how to email your school board, that kind of thing. Things, proactive sort of things, because people were seeking ways to get engaged, but they didn't know how. And of course, now we have so many amazing organizations like, again, United Against Book Bans, Authors Against Book Bans, and other state organizations, Texans for the Texas Freedom to Read. They all have great resources too. So now, mostly Carolyn and I, again, connect people. People will reach out and say, I'm looking for a library. Do you know a librarian in this state or a rural community that can speak about XYZ and that kind of thing. So we do a lot more of that now.
So this was exciting to me. You were part of the Librarians documentary,
Yes.
which a documentary about librarians. I was impressed for sure, because we don't ordinarily get those sorts of things. How did that come about?
So early on, so when we launched the Freedom Fighters website, we actually got some coverage from CNN. And when that happened, I mean, the whole Freedom Fighters, just, I would say in I guess in lots of ways kind of blew up, in that, we were getting school library journalists reaching out. I mean, so many places were reaching out about, we want to interview you. And we were thinking all we did was do a Twitter hashtag takeover, which was a little bizarre. But one of the people that reached out once they saw that CNN report was Kim Snyder. And Kim Snyder is a Peabody Award-winning director. She has done several documentaries. One that recently was nominated for an Academy Award. And she approached us. We actually had several different people approach us, but one of the things, we said no to several people. I just think, as librarians, we're just like anybody else. We do our research, we do the homework, right? So we researched a little bit about her, and we're just really impressed. And so we took some time to talk to her. And she and her colleague Janique also, they just were so invested in what was happening. They basically shared, what they wanted to do, and they wanted to focus on Texas, follow us around. They wanted us to record, things that we did, whether it was here at home, virtually, in our schools or whatever. And so, but one of the things that we noticed was that the book banning issues didn't stop in just Texas. And so it started to spread across, in Florida and in New Jersey, and just across the country. And so what ultimately ended up happening is the movie itself, which was in production for about 3 years, because they were filming for over 3 years, expanded. And so last December, they reached out to us and other libraries that they'd recorded with and said, we submitted an opportunity to show our documentary at the Sundance Film Festival. And so, of course, we were so excited because everybody knows about Sundance. You may not have gone, but you
Right.
know about the Sundance Film Festival, right? So we were like, oh, that's awesome. Well, good luck. Well, I think what she told us later, she actually was considering um, withdrawing the opportunity because the movie wasn't even finished. She basically sent like a promo clip, but when she tried to withdraw, the committee said, no, we want this film. We want this film. And so
Wow.
she essentially spent Thanksgiving to New Year's working on this documentary. And so this documentary did premiere at the Sundance Film Festival. She also had other partners come in, like Maria Cuomo and Sarah Jessica Parker, who signed on. And so I say we all, there was about, I don't know, Carolyn Foote and I, Amanda Jones, Suzette Baker, who's in Llano County, and then Martha Hickson. I mean, Audrey Youngblood, and we all were there at Sundance for a couple of days at the different film premieres and participating
Nice.
in panels and stuff. And so now it's gone on and shown. It showed at South by in Texas. It's been at the Miami Film Festival. It actually just finished showing here in the Dallas Film Festival, where it won the documentary award. So it's definitely making the rounds. And again, it's to your point about like nobody would have thought. I think the reason that it's really catching on right now is because the movie itself discusses like the different things that are happening around intellectual freedom through the perspective of the librarians and the attacks they have undergone, or the doxing, the harassment, the bullying, whatever those things are. And it's all compacted in an hour and 30 minutes. And it's for a person that maybe has undergone a lot of that, it could definitely be very triggering because you not just see one person, it's several people, and you see it happening across the country. There's literally you see the movie travel from Texas like catch on fire, and then the next thing we know, we're moving to Florida and it's catching on fire, and we're moving to New Jersey and it's catching. I mean, it's literally just not just it's visually startling, but time and time again, when the movie has been shown, when it's finished, there's been standing ovations because there's this definite understanding about what's at stake regarding book access, intellectual freedom, and its impact on us as a democracy.
Do you think there's going to be an opportunity for the general public to get to see this in some way?
That is the hope. Originally, it was supposed to show on Independent Lens in the fall, but I think they've delayed that because it's my understanding that it might be showing in theaters. I don't know. But it's definitely, if you go to the Librarians website, you can actually sign up to host a viewing. So whether you're like an association or something, you can host, even an organization. I think there's been some school libraries or public libraries that have hosted a showing in a theater and that sort of thing too. But eventually, I think next spring they said it will release to the general public. So
That's exciting.
it is.
It'd be nice to have something local. I need to think on that.
Yeah.
What should new librarians know about book banning in America today?
One of the things that I get invited to do often, and so does my colleague Carolyn, is to speak to librarians that are in school right now. And I think this is definitely an opportunity of learning. I don't think if you're currently in a school library program, it's so important to be paying attention to what's happening, to learn, what things are working, what are not working. Because the rest of us, like me and others, we kind of had to learn just in time, right? So when I think about now, like even with the book that I wrote with my colleagues, one of the things we talk about often is how can we be proactive? And one of the proactive things you can do is just to pay attention to what's happening, to what's being banned or what's being, requested to be removed, and what's the why. Because we're living in a copycat time where people will copy and paste about one book, and the next thing you know, that same book is a problem two cities down, or up north in your state or whatever. Because nobody's read the book. And I think what people forget is that, and in fact, I heard about a lawsuit being filed recently, is that we know that the people that are removing books, whether it's a school board, a principal, or whoever's, removing the books, when they actively admit that they have not read the book, that's grounds for a lawsuit, because then they're obviously imposing their own personal opinion and allowing that bias to interfere with the policies that clearly state that that's not what should be happening. So in terms of new librarians, I think just studying what's happening, discussing what's happening, what can people learn from it? I mean, it's definitely something that you want to maximize as an instructor. I know I would if I was teaching. But I love talking about it because I think there's just a lot to be learned and gleaned from. So that should this happen to you, you know what to do and what not to do. Because I think that's the other thing too. You hear about cases where things don't go right. That there's something to be learned from that too.
So congratulations to you. You were one of the honorees in 2023 for People Magazine's Women Changing the World. How did that occur?
That's a great question. I got a phone call. Well, I got a phone call. Carolyn Foote and I got an email about this, and we were kind of surprised. And so we don't know how that happened. But it is quite an honor, because when I think about it, and here's the other thing too that I want to tell people is, you mentioned about being the front face. I might be that person, but I also know there's so many people behind the scenes doing this very important work. I do try to share those stories of what's happening, because it's not just me. I mean, I know a librarian up the road from me that's working really hard because her administration is removing books that they think should not be there, and she's pushing back. And so I think that I feel like I'm more representing others. So I really work hard to say that it's not just about me, it's about the people that are all working hard. And, I want to share some of those stories that I hear. But I don't know how that came about, but it certainly was quite the day in terms of, getting interviewed and taking the pictures. I think back to when they were trying to figure out where to take us. They wanted to go to a library, but we couldn't go to a school library because our schools weren't going to let us do that. And we ended up going to Book People, which is our local independent bookstore. And Charlie, the owner, was like, absolutely, come over here. We'll reserve a little section for y'all to take pictures. And so she of course was one of the indie bookstores, along with the owner from Blue Willow, who filed that lawsuit against HB 900. And so she's been so supportive of libraries and access and stuff, but she happily supported us to have the pictures taken there. And I mean, I guess the rest was just history. We were in a magazine. It's pretty cool.
Very cool. So is there a book or a series of books from your childhood that still resonates with you today?
Yes. I have to kind of think about that one, because it's been a while since I've thought about that. So my parents weren't very well off, very humble means and stuff. But so I didn't have tons of books. But I did have a few, and I had an aunt who sent me a collection of 3 books by E.B. White: Charlotte's Web, Trumpet of the Swan, and Stuart Little. And I still have those books. They have my name in them. They're yellow. They're a little brittle, but I love them. And when I think about those books, I grew up in South Texas, deep South Texas. I'm just 20 minutes from the border. And I read books like Little House on the Prairie, and I read, Ramona and all those kind of books. But the things that people don't realize is that, I never saw myself in a book, because obviously, in Little House on the Prairie, you're not going to see sugar snow. You're not going to see any snow in South Texas, for one. There are no prairies. And or Little Houses in the Big Woods. But anyway, when I think about Charlotte's Web, though, I think about the story of, like friendship and kindness and valuing life. And I was thinking when I was thinking about this question, I was like, I should go back and read that book again, but I should listen to an audiobook and maybe listen to it with my granddaughters and grandson, because I love that book. And then I think about Trumpet of the Swan. I don't know if you've read that book, but it's a story about Lewis, who's born without a voice. And one of the things I loved about that book is it took me to a place that I could never go to. There was no lake around me, and I was learning about swans and what they were called and how they got around. But I don't even think I realized at the time, but it also was, the essence about it was about the importance of family and perseverance and courage, because he works to take care of his family, and even when it was like the most difficult. And so your question is making me want to go back and read those books again, because I think it'll be interesting to see like those same things as an adult. I actually read both of those books to first grade classes like 20 years ago when I was just started here in Leander, and the students love those books. And you'd think first graders, and I said, yep, we would go. It'd take us all year to get through both of them, but they love these books because the vocabulary was rich, the story was just so engaging, and they just were enamored with these characters. And that's just the power of a good book, right? And so what a blessing to have these books. I don't know how popular they are anymore. They probably have to compete with things that are flashy and shiny, but still good stories. Timeless.
Definitely still good stories, and still in so many libraries. What are you reading now?
So right now, I'm actually listening. I have to listen more than I read in person because I'm so busy, and if I don't, I'm never going to get to read. So I'm actually listening to The Good Left Undone by Adriana Trigiani. It's a historical fiction novel that's set in Italy, and it's a generational story. I'm about halfway through, so I can't really tell you too much, but I am enjoying the story at all. It's I just have always loved her books, and I saw it was actually a book that was on sale, and I was like, I'm going to get that book because I hadn't listened to one of her books in a long time and wanted to get back to it. I did finish 2 books this past weekend. Yesterday I finished The Trouble with Heroes by Kate Messner, and I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it's a story about, it's a book written in verse. The character's name is Finn, and he is trying to work through the loss and grief of losing his dad. And so Kate Messner is a friend, and so I had this arc that I hadn't read, and it took me, I had to pause, and I finally had a chance to finish it. And what I love is that she not only helps us to learn or watch this character kind of work through his grief and even anger sometimes, just a gamut of emotions, but she does it through the lens of having this boy travel the 46 Adirondack high peaks. So he basically has a goal to finish each one of these climbs through it all. And so not only are you learning about the resilience of this character, but you're also like on an expedition through each climb, and he's kind of processing what he's learning and what he knows about his dad or doesn't know. And then finally, the last one that I did read, I finished this one Friday, was The Next Day by Melinda Gates. It's The Next Day: Transitions, Change, and Moving Forward. So last week I had the opportunity to listen to her in conversation with Brene Brown. Such a great opportunity.
Nice.
But she discusses, it's not a very long book, so definitely I would encourage anybody that's just wants to, if you enjoyed A Moment of Lift, I think you'd enjoy this one too. But she talks about the transitions in life can be opportunities to grow from if we lean into those opportunities. I think sometimes when there's transitions and things are unsettling, we tend to go to what's safe rather than let me just see what's going to happen. And so for this reader who's about to turn 60 this summer, I'm just kind of listening and leaning in on those kinds of things, because I'm like, what's next? What's next?
Well, maybe you start a podcast, because that's what I did when I hit that magic age.
Okay.
I just picked up the Melinda Gates book. I'm a big fan for
Hmm.
sure of hers. It's when you have these life events that happen to you, you can respond in a variety of ways, and it's been a joy to watch how she's responded
Yep.
and created a whole life for herself.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think one of the things about her book, this one particularly, it's a very easy read. It's not too, I mean, excuse me, I have the book, but I also got the audio because I found out that the audio is actually cheaper than the book, which is kind of strange. And she reads
Unusual.
the book. Yeah, it was like $8, and I was like, oh, I'll download it. So I actually started listening to the audio book before I went to go listen to her. So I was already about halfway in
Mm.
when I got to hear her. But and she reads it all, which is great. But um, she shares enough to that where you recognize like she's learning from things that happen in her life, but not too much that's gonna like that she still maintains that line of privacy, which is important to her, which I totally get. It makes total sense to me, but enough to make you go like, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. That's a good way to think about this or that sort of thing. So very got me to reflect about a couple of things.
Well, Becky, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And for our followers, please remember to find us on Apple Podcasts, find our YouTube channel, and we are at all the other podcast places as well. Please like, subscribe, and share. Again, thank you, Becky.
Thank you so much, Tom, for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.